Welcome back to the Ogletree Outlook. We're previewing Alabama and Mississippi State in Bryant-Denny Stadium tonight at 6 o'clock Central Time. It's Nick Saban versus the Pirate, Mike Leach. I had to get some Pirates of the Caribbean theme music there to start the show off instead of just my boring voice. We're always looking for ways to improve the Ogletree Outlook here. So, as always, let me know your feedback. Let me know ways I can improve. Let me know what you guys want to hear, what you like, what you don't like. Without further ado, let's start talking some Crimson Tide and Bulldogs. Obviously, Mike Leach and his air raid offense are getting most of the attention, and rightfully so. Because that matchup is really, and I don't think many people are viewing it this way, but it's really the main defensive mastermind in college football, Nick Saban, against the main offensive mastermind of college football, Mike Leach. If this weren't Leach's first year at Mississippi State, and they weren't still in this kind of transition time, players leaving the program, a little bit of struggles there, this matchup would be fascinating. And I hope it gets to the point where this Mississippi State offense is more formidable and more reliable in the SEC than it has been to this point. Because to watch the air raid against Nick Saban's defense year after year is going to be an absolute treat. So I do hope it gets to that point. But despite that matchup, I want to start off by talking about Alabama's offense, and we'll get to the defense to close out this episode. But I think this Mississippi State defense gets overshadowed by the offense. This defense is darn good. They're right up at the top of the SEC in many major statistical categories. They're especially good against the run. They're top 15, top 20 in the FBS in a lot of categories. And the headlines about how great the offense started and how poorly it's been since the season opening win over LSU, that's kind of overshadowed how good this defense has been. And when I was kind of researching and preparing and learning more about Mississippi State, what some of the things that Nick Saban and the Alabama players said this week really stuck out to me. And they were talking about how kind of unorthodox and different this defense is for Mississippi State. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I knew they had brought in a whole new coaching staff. I knew it was a new look, but I didn't know what was unique or special or different about it. But when Mike Leach was hired away from Washington State and became the head coach in Starkville, his defensive coordinator that he hired came over from San Diego State. Well, technically, Zach Arnett was the defensive coordinator at San Diego State, had just taken the Syracuse job. He had been there for just a couple of weeks probably when Mike Leach came calling. So he was a Syracuse defensive coordinator for just a little bit in between San Diego State and Mississippi State. It's a big jump from the Mountain West to the SEC West in a matter of weeks. But this guy is kind of a defensive play-calling prodigy. He's only in his 30s. San Diego State defensive coordinator was the biggest title he had ever held before Mississippi State. But his defenses at San Diego State were rock solid. They were top 10, top 15 in the country. He was there for a couple of years, and they were consistently good across the board on defense. So props to Mike Leach for making an outside-the-box hire and bringing in someone whom he probably wasn't that familiar with, but he saw this young guy, Zach Arnett, having success at San Diego State and took a shot on him. So props to Mike Leach for that. But anyway, what's unique about this defense is it is run out of 3-3-5 personnel. So what that means is 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. So it's a base nickel defense, like basically every defense is nowadays. But what can be so confounding about it to opposing offenses is they can give you so many different looks out of this 3-3-5 front 6 or 3-3-5 formation. And the front 6 is what is so quirky about it. Nick Saban even said it in one of his press conferences earlier this week. He said they do a lot of stuff up front that creates problems for you. When I went back and watched some film of Mississippi State, I did notice some pretty quirky stuff. For example, dropping a 300-pound defensive end into coverage. That's not something that you see every day, but that's something that they did, and not just once. That was something they did multiple times. So just guys moving around in the front, whether that's moving around like stunting or instead of lateral movement, it might be like a linebacker kind of runs toward the line of scrimmage like he's going to blitz and then backs off. So it's just things that they'll do to confuse the quarterback, confuse the communication on the offensive line, and just see if they can throw a wrench in what the offense is planning to do. But really the key to the, versatility of this Bulldogs defensive front is the linebackers. They have three of them, and in its simplest form, this front can look very similar to what Alabama runs, where they put not an offensive linebacker. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. An outside linebacker up on the line of scrimmage where he's almost acting as a defensive end. And then your other two linebackers are off the ball. So in Alabama's defense, your two off-the-ball linebackers are Dylan Moses and Christian Harris. And then your outside linebacker, who almost always plays up on the line, is Will Anderson or Chris Allen. Those guys kind of split those snaps. And Mississippi State has that very standard, very common look some of the time. But other times, they'll bring two of those linebackers up. I guess you would say they become outside linebackers. They're up on the line. So you have almost what becomes a 5-1-5 type offense. 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. One linebacker off the ball, 3 to 5 yards off the ball, and then your 5 defensive backs. So they'll just give you a lot of different looks, and it's really the key is those linebackers. Errol Thompson, number 40, has been around a long time. He's kind of the centerpiece of that defense. It seems like he's the linebacker who is least often on the line of scrimmage. He's usually your guy who's in that Dylan Moses, Christian Harris position at inside linebacker off the ball. But they have a couple of other guys, Tyrus Wheat, Aaron Brule, Jordan Davis. All these guys factor in to Mississippi State's rotation at outside linebacker, and just kind of that versatile, multiple look that they can give you. If the name Jordan Davis sounds familiar, which it maybe shouldn't, but this is for the hardcore Alabama recruiting fans. Jordan Davis actually signed with Alabama out of high school. In the class of 2018, he was I believe in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He was the number 108 player. So this guy's got some talent. He was actually one slot below Josh Jobe, who's starting for Alabama at corner right now, in the recruiting rankings that year by 24/7 Sports. But due to academic issues, he spent 2 years at JUCO, junior college, and ended up, it was kind of a complicated situation. He recommitted to Alabama during his first year at JUCO. Then a month later, he flipped from Alabama to the Tennessee Volunteers. And during his second year at JUCO, he decided he would be going to Mississippi State. Well, what a jump, going from JUCO to the SEC West. And then, what a surprise, now Mike Leach is your coach. So quite the ride for Jordan Davis, but now he is playing in the SEC West at Mississippi State. And if you don't think this means something to him, playing against Alabama, the team that originally recruited him and that he signed with out of high school, just check his Twitter feed. Jordan Davis, I think his Twitter handle is JLP Davis. He has sent multiple tweets over the last week about this game meaning a little extra. Talking about how it's been years in waiting, maybe not to play against them. I don't know if he really harbors any bitterness, but it's just a cool moment for him, you know? I mean, he went on his recruiting visit to Bryant-Denny Stadium, talked to Nick Saban, thought it was all going to work out, kind of didn't go the way he planned, and now he's getting the chance to play against that team that he thought for a while that he would be playing for. So this is a meaningful game for him. Number 6, Mississippi State linebacker Jordan Davis. Keep an eye on him. going back to the Mississippi State defense as a whole, even though this defensive front is quirky, it works. It's been very, very effective so far. They're second in the SEC in getting off the field on third down. They allow opposing offenses to convert on third down just under a third of the time. So, like I said, that's second in the SEC, and that is currently 18th out of 101 FBS teams. Another interesting little nugget, and let me pull this up. I didn't have it ready, but every team that has played Mississippi State this year has had their fewest yards per play of the season against the Bulldogs, except one, and that was Arkansas. But so 3 of the 4 opponents for Mississippi State had really their worst offensive output of the season when they played Mississippi State. LSU had 5.1 yards per play in that season opening loss, their lowest of the year. Kentucky was held to just 3 yards per play, their fewest of the year. And A&M, despite beating Mississippi State 28-14, they were held to 5.7 yards per play, their fewest of the year. So that kind of tells you the talent and the ability that this Mississippi State defense has. Now, I mentioned they're quite good against the run. They're top 20 in the FBS in yards per attempt, and they were even better before the A&M game. They had allowed, they were averaging about 70 rushing yards per game allowed entering that A&M game. They got gashed a little bit by Isaiah Spiller 2 weeks ago before their bye week, and that hurt their rushing stats a little bit. But they are solid against the run. They're good against the pass too, but not quite as good. I would say they're great against the run. They are good or slightly above average at stopping the pass. They can give up some busted coverages and some big plays in the passing game at times. Really, I would say the back end has some holes, and the holes on the back end are kind of covered up by that front that can get some pressure on the quarterback, control the line of scrimmage, and really confuse the quarterback with who's dropping, who's blitzing, who's dropping into this zone, who's covering this guy. So the front, I think, for Mississippi State kind of covers some of the issues that they have on the back end. But moving on to the Alabama offense, even though it happened a week ago, the headline for this offense is the loss of Jaylen Waddle and what that will mean for the offense. And you just hate to see it for a guy like him who every time he comes up to answer questions from the media, Waddle, you can just see the energy that he has and just the passion that he has for the game. Just always has a smile on his face. There was one time a couple weeks ago where the team's media relations staff were telling us, the reporters, to raise our hands on Zoom, click the raise hand button to ask a question. And then Jaylen Waddle, just being kind of the goofy guy that he is, he raised his hand as well and told the media relations people, I'm raising my hand too, I got a question. So just his spirit and his energy, I'm personally going to miss seeing it when we get to interview him, and I'm sure his teammates and his coaches will miss him hundreds more times than I will. Just a tremendous talent, and what he means to this offense is huge. Nick Saban actually addressed the loss of Jaylen Waddle and what he means to the offense in his Monday press conference this week, and he compared him to a former NBA superstar. Listen to this. This is Nick Saban talking about just how impossible it is to replace Jaylen Waddle on that offense.
You can't replace a guy like Jaylen Waddle in terms of what his ability is, and it's no different than losing Allen Iverson. If your guy scores 30, 40 points a game, he's that.
Oh crap!
Kind of impact player, but we can do the things that he can do well, and he doesn't need to be anybody but himself. And we don't put expectations on him. We just want him to be the best player that he can be.
So I think the audio cut out there for a second, but Saban's talking about Slade Bolden at the end of that. Slade Bolden, kind of that backup slot receiver role who came in when Waddle was hurt against Tennessee. and had quite an impressive game. I mean, with 30 seconds or a minute of notice when Waddle gets hurt on the opening kickoff, Bolden steps in there, and he's targeted by Mac Jones on 4 of the first 11 throws of the game and caught all of them. I mean, the guy, he came into this game, I think, with 2 career catches and had 6 catches for 90-some yards against Tennessee on the road in a rivalry game. So Slade Bolden's got some game. Here's Nick Saban in that same press conference talking about what Slade brings to the offense.
Well, Slade's really quick. A lot of guys like Slade, become very effective slot kind of players because they're quick out of a break. They got good initial quickness, really good hands, very smart and heady in terms of their instincts and their ability to make quick decisions. So that's something that fit well for him. I know he played quarterback. He played all over the place in high school. But he's done a good job. He did a good job in the game, and he's one of the guys that I really was referring to when I said a lot of guys had to step up.
So Saban talking about Slade Bolden, and we kind of knew this already. He was a heck of an athlete in high school, played quarterback, played some running back, wide receiver, just did a lot of different things. And you knew that he was versatile with the way that the Alabama coaches used him last year in that Slade cat direct snap kind of formation where it's 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and they bring him out there and just direct snap it to him and let him use his quickness and his field vision to convert the short yardage. So Slade Bolden going to have a significantly bigger role on this offense going forward. With Jaylen Waddle out against Tennessee, Slade Bolden played every single play except one in which the offense had 3 receivers on the field. So Devontae Smith and John Mechie are your 2 outside guys. And then it looks like going forward, if there's a slot receiver on the field, it's going to be Slade Bolden. You're going to see a lot of him. So get used to the name Slade Bolden. We also got the chance to speak with Slade this week in the press conference, and he talked about the rapport that he has with Mac Jones going back a couple years to when he was being recruited and when he was deciding where he was going to play his college football. So here's Slade talking about the rapport that he has with Alabama quarterback Mac Jones.
The best way I can describe my game is, I'm not going to be the fastest guy on the field, but I feel like I got a lot of heart, a lot of determination. I'm going to be able to get open and make plays, and I will catch a ball if it's around me.
Played the wrong clip there. That was Slade talking about his game. Now here's the right clip where he's talking about how far back his relationship with Mac goes and even some late-night throwing sessions.
Me and Mac, we became pretty close. Actually, when I was getting recruited on my official visit, he was my host. So just from there, we had a special bond and connection. And, it's funny because, anytime he needed a throwing partner, I was always there, and I was always willing to help. Because not only was it helping him, it was also helping me get better. So, we do have that connection.
So they obviously go way back. Mac Jones hosted Slade Bolden when he was on his recruiting visit here, and they've spent hours upon hours, obviously at practice, but even outside of practice, just kind of building that chemistry. And you could see it. I mean, for Slade to go in there with a moment's notice and for Mac to have that trust in him to target him 4 times on his first 11 throws, that shows you the trust that Mac Jones has in Slade Bolden. So like I said, even though I screwed up the audio clip, Slade's a guy who is not the biggest, not the fastest, but he knows how to get open. He has that quickness that Coach Saban talked about. He just knows how to get open. He has good hands, even though he had a drop in the end zone at the end of the Tennessee game. I'm sure he was beating himself up about that, but he's reliable. He doesn't have the same explosiveness as Jaylen Waddle has, but don't sell Slade Bolden short. He's a talented athlete. In addition to Bolden, if there's another receiver who maybe gets a little bit of boost in playing time, it may be freshman wide receiver Javon Baker. It was clarified on Twitter back in fall camp by Alabama's director of sports science, Dr. Matt Ray, that the young man's name is Javon Baker, not Javon. So if you hear anyone over the next couple weeks say Javon Baker, slap him. It's Javon. Javon Baker, the freshman wide receiver, number 5, made his Alabama offensive debut against the Volunteers, played 3 snaps, and he could potentially be in line for a bigger role going forward as well. Here is Nick Saban talking about his true freshman wide receiver, Javon Baker.
Yeah, Javon has a big catch radius. He's got really good hands, very physical player. I think with our young guys, the challenge with them has been, you guys have to be able to go out there and know what to do it with confidence, and get some consistency in performance. They're all
cut him off a little bit there, but what he went on to say is they're all talented guys. They're all doing well, and it's just a matter of that consistency. It's just a matter of knowing what your assignment is, what your route is, how that might change based on the coverage and based on the situation, and then being able to execute that on a consistent basis. So, but Nick Saban obviously thinks highly of Javon Baker and what he could bring to the offense sooner or later. I don't know. It's really, from Saban's perspective, it's really up to him. It's about how hard he's willing to work and, how quickly he's able to pick up the playbook. But if you thought Saban was complimentary of Javon Baker, wait till you hear what Alabama safety Jordan Battle said about him. He throws out a heck of a comparison here, and he is, he had a big smile on his face, and he obviously thinks very highly of this freshman wideout. This is Jordan Battle, Alabama's sophomore starting safety, on Javon Baker's game.
He's a great player. He has great routes, and he has probably the greatest hands on the team. He has strong hands as a player. He reminds me of almost like a Amari Cooper type of guy.
Almost an Amari Cooper type of guy. That is high praise, high expectations for the young man. And for Battle to say that he has some of the best hands on the team, on a team that has Devontae Smith on it, well, I think that tells you all you need to know about how highly Javon Baker's teammates and coaches think of him. So in that absence of Jaylen Waddle, Slade Bolden obviously is immediately taking over that slot receiver role. But, Jaylen Waddle's the type of guy who you can't replace with just one guy. So if there's another receiver who does get a little uptick in playing time over the next couple weeks, it could very well be Javon Baker. Wrapping up the talk about the Alabama offense, I have some audio from Mississippi State defensive coordinator Zach Arnett as well. Mentioned him at the beginning of the episode. This is what he had to say. The initial question was about Mac Jones, and he, as you'll hear, he's very complimentary of Mac in his answer. But he gets into some interesting stuff about a little bit of scheme stuff, and then he mentions the offensive line as well, and really just how to handle this offense as a whole. This is interesting. Here's defensive coordinator Zach Arnett on how the heck he's going to try to contain this explosive, lethal Alabama offense.
Anyone was throwing for, I think, 1,900 yards through 5 games, am I correct? That's 400 yards a game. He's incredibly accurate with the football, puts it right on the money to those guys, and then he does a good job of getting it out on time. I mean, if teams are dropping back and playing zone, rushing 3 or 4 guys, he knows when to hold on to it and let routes get into the windows. And if teams are trying to pressure him and play man, he gets it out and beats the pressure. Not that there's hardly ever any pressure with how good their line is. And then, you're playing man-to-man on those receivers. That's a dangerous world to be living in, playing too much man on those guys, because they're the best in the country.
It's a dangerous world to play man coverage against Alabama's wide receivers, even without Jaylen Waddle. Devontae Smith has shown he can get open from anywhere. John Mechie is kind of a breakout, out of nowhere deep threat, and Slade Bolden, we know, has some ability to separate as well. So Zach Arnett knows that his defensive backs and linebackers are going to have a hard time in coverage against these Alabama skill players. What really caught my interest about that comment, though, was him saying that Mac is savvy enough to know when it's zone to maybe wait an extra half a second and let his receivers come open and find the window, find the crack in the zone, and have the wherewithal to deliver an accurate ball on time and hit his receiver. And when it's man, to get it out maybe a little quicker, to beat the pressure, and again place it away where only his receiver can get it, and the defender doesn't have a chance to break it up. And that's something I feel like fans often forget about playing quarterback. Is it's not as simple as just this is where the play is supposed to go. This is I take the ball, I look to the left. If that's not open, I look to the right. If that's not open, I run or I throw it away. It's a lot more complicated than that. A lot of these plays have different elements to them where the quarterback's read is dictated by what he sees when the ball is snapped. If he sees the safety rotate a certain way, and that tells him this is cover one, this is cover two, this guy's in man coverage, this is a zone to this side, that's going to affect how he reads it. And so it's really, when we complement a quarterback's knowledge of the playbook, knowledge of the scheme, chemistry with his receivers, that's not just talking about, okay, this is the play call, this is where I need to go with it. It's compartmentalizing that in his mind and still being able to adjust that immediately on the fly with what he sees after the snap. And I think that's an underrated aspect of what Mac Jones is being asked to do and what he has been so successful at so far this season. Real quick, last thing on this offense. Y'all probably by now have heard about Mac Jones setting the school record for consecutive completions last week with 19, dating back to the Georgia game. So he finished the Georgia game 8 for 8, completed his last 8 throws, and started the Tennessee game 11 for 11. So 19 straight completions, broke Greg McElroy's school record. But I did a little digging and looked back a little farther in that Georgia game, and Mac had actually gone 10 for 11 right before ending the game 8 for 8. So really, when you go back a little farther, there was a stretch where Mac Jones completed 29 of 30 passes for, I don't have my tweet up in front of me. I tweeted this. You can scroll back a little bit on my Twitter feed. But I think it was 495 yards over those 30 passes. So he throws 30 passes, completes 29 of them for 400 some yards, and 23 of the 29 were for a first down or a touchdown. That's just an incredible stretch. And the one incompletion wasn't a bad throw. It wasn't an interception. It was a throwaway. He rolled to his right, didn't have anybody open, and instead of forcing it across his body over the middle, he just smartly threw it away and lived to see another down. So I think that stretch really just shows you the efficiency and the intelligence and the accuracy that Mac Jones is playing with right now. I think that's about all I have on the Alabama offense. I briefly wondered if there was a chance that Alabama's streak of scoring 35 or more points, if maybe that streak would come to an end this week, just because of, still having to adjust to not having Jaylen Waddle. Mississippi State's coming off a bye, so they're more well-rested. This is Alabama's 6th straight week. And then just the quirkiness of that that Mississippi State defense. I thought maybe there was a chance that the Bulldogs could be the first team since Clemson in the national championship 2 years ago to hold Alabama's offense under 35 points. Mississippi State actually has, the last 2 years, played quite well against Alabama's offense. They held them to just 24 points back in 2018, Tua Tagovailoa's first year as the starter. And then last year, despite or in the game that Tua got hurt, that wasn't a super explosive output for Alabama's offense either. The final of that one was 35-3, 38-3, something like that, which is below average for Alabama's offense. So, all things considered, I think there's a chance. I think Mississippi State's defense has as good a chance as anyone to end that 35-point streak for Alabama, but I still don't think it's going to happen. There's just too many ways that Alabama's offense can beat you. So that wraps up my comments on Alabama's offense. Now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball and combating that Mike Leach air raid, throw the ball 60 to 70 times a game offense. We all saw week one of the SEC, not week one of college football. But the season opener, when Mississippi State just took it to the defending national champs on the road in Tiger Stadium in Death Valley, put up 44 points. Bulldogs quarterback KJ Costello threw for an SEC record 623 passing yards, and it was like, whoa, this air raid stuff, this might work in the SEC. We might be looking at something revolutionary here. Mississippi State had 16 passes in that game go for at least 15 yards against LSU in their 44-34 win. But in their 3 games since, they only have 10 passes of 15 yards or more. So 16 in the first game and only 10 in the next 3 games. And this is even more shocking of a stat to me. They have just 3 offensive touchdowns in their last 3 games after that onslaught of the Tigers in the season opener. Well, what's changed? What's the difference here? How could they be on the verge of an offensive revolution in the SEC one week, and then the next 3 games, it's just, you score 3 touchdowns in 3 games. What happened? So I actually had the chance to ask Nick Saban that this week. It's been pointed out by some analysts that LSU played a large amount of man coverage against that Mississippi State offense in the season opener. And the other 3 teams that they've played, which would be Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M, played a lot of zone coverage and didn't rush as many guys. So they might rush only 3 and drop 8 guys into zone coverage. So I got the chance to ask Nick Saban about that, why he thought that playing zone was so much more effective against Mississippi State than playing man coverage. And his answer to me was pretty interesting and honestly more insightful than I thought he would be willing to go. So here's what Nick Saban, the defensive guru, had to say about defending the air raid.
I don't know what the best word to describe it. I don't know. It's not really exotic, but it's really, really a good system in terms of how they spread you on the field, the pattern concepts that they use, and I think that they do a really good job of coaching the quarterback when it's man-to-man and when it's zone, and how to take advantage of that. I think that people who have played really good zone against them break on the ball. You got to tackle well in space when you do that. You got to break on the ball, and you got to force them to sort of take some of the shorter throws and not make explosive plays on you, which they've shown the capability of doing when you're playing kind of man-to-man kind of concept. So I can't tell you exactly why that is, but when you're that spread out on the field and they've got 5 guys going out for a pass all the time, and you're horizontally stretched like you are. When you play man-to-man, somebody gets beat, you got an issue. And when you play zone, you got a better chance to play inside out and break on the ball.
And boy, if LSU didn't learn that lesson. If you go, again, on my Twitter feed, I'm always tweeting out clips from Alabama games and of Alabama's upcoming opponent throughout the week. So check it out at the Ogletree on Twitter for some of those clips. But today I tweeted out one. It was from the LSU game. LSU was on offense. Or no, that doesn't make sense. Mississippi State, of course, was on offense. It was 3rd and 13. And LSU decides to rush 6 guys on 3rd and 13. And obviously you blitz. If you blitz, you play man coverage over top of it. But then there were every receiver, and maybe y'all can even hear like the frustration or the confusion in my voice, but every receiver within 20 yards of the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 13 was just in one-on-one man coverage. So you blitz 6, and you're going to leave so much space wide open. It's almost inevitable that one of those guys is going to beat their man, and the quarterback's going to have an easy throw and convert the first down, and that's exactly what happened. Costello was even pressured, and his receiver was so open, it was an easy throw. He was pressured, he stepped up a little bit, and he hit, I believe it was Osiris Mitchell, their great receiver, number 5, who made the play and converted on 3rd and 13. So LSU certainly learned what Nick Saban was talking about there, about defending space and them being able to make you pay if you play man coverage and get beat. Saban talked about playing good zone coverage and tackling well in space and breaking on the ball. Now, that's been kind of a struggle for Alabama's defense, but I don't know if it will be as much of a struggle in this game, and here's why. A lot of Alabama's mental errors and busted coverages so far this season have been when, for example, say the offense runs a play action and the linebackers, for some reason this year, are stepping up really quickly. They're falling for that play action fake hard. And that vacates a lot of space behind them to where even when they realize it's zone coverage and they back off and drop into their zone, it's too late. And there's a lot of open space behind them, between them and the safeties, and it's open for a slot receiver to run a slant, for a tight end up the seam. We saw that a ton with those over the middle routes against Texas A&M. Their slot receiver and their tight end killed Alabama on those. Same thing with Ole Miss, and their tight end ran a lot of those, and it's just a lot of open space over the middle of the field. But because this Mississippi State offense is so pass-oriented, I think I would expect the linebackers to not bite on those play-action fakes as much because the Bulldogs throw the ball 70 times a game. So there's a very slim chance on a given play that it's going to be a run just because of their offensive philosophy. So I'm curious to see how that, just the fact that Mississippi State is so pass-oriented, will affect the linebackers' reads, and the rest of the defense's reads as well, but the inside linebackers in particular, Moses and Harris. And the tackling in space, like we all know, has been a little bit of an issue. I don't need to rehash that, but it's just been a recurring issue. And with a team that stretches you, I mean, like Nick Saban said, a team that stretches you as much as the air raid with Mississippi State, you got to tackle well. So maybe they've been extra emphasizing that in practice this week, but we'll see. Mississippi State quarterback KJ Costello has shown a lot of struggles with post-snap processing. He has 10 interceptions this year. Many of those, quite simply, were just due to him not seeing what the defense was doing. And he's not a small guy, so it's not a height issue like it was with Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett. I think it's just a processing issue. There was one play, I don't have it written down, but I don't know which game it was. But he's just throwing a simple out route to the flat. But the problem was the defender was underneath, and instead of playing man-to-man, he just dropped in zone out to the flat, and Costello never saw him. And the defender's there and just jumps up and makes an easy interception. And Costello never saw him. So that can be mitigated a little bit when the defense is playing man coverage because it's not too confusing. It's pretty cut and dry. This guy's playing this guy's on this guy. But when you're in a zone, it can make it a lot more complicated for the quarterback to make those post-snap reads, and especially when he's under pressure, which Costello has been under pressure a lot this year. And Mississippi State, due in large part to the turnovers by Costello and their other quarterback, Will Rogers, who may actually play may actually start and play a decent bit against Alabama, due in large part to their 12 interceptions. MSU has the most turnovers per game in the FBS. They have 16 total turnovers in 4 games. So that's for the mathematically challenged. That's 4 turnovers per game, which is the most of any team in the FBS. And a lot of that is a result of defenses playing zone coverage, rushing 3, still managing to get pressure with only 3 rushers. And then the quarterback is flustered. He doesn't have time to make a good read, and he throws into 8 guys in coverage, and you're going to turn the ball over a lot when you do that. Touching on the Bulldogs skill players real quickly, they got some size. Osiris Mitchell, I mentioned, is their top receiver, number 5. He's 6'5", 210. Malik Heath, number 4, he's 6'3", 215. Number 18, Cameron Gardner, is 6'4", 220. Number 85, Austin Williams, is 6'3", 200. They had, actually, Alabama transfer Tyrell Shavers. He was number 9. He was 6'6". You know the size that he brought from when he was with the Crimson Tide. He has since left the program. Mike Leach confirmed this week. But still, even with losing a guy like Shavers, you can tell the size that they have on the outside. And I don't expect Alabama to play a lot of man-to-man. So that'll help. Patrick Surtain, Josh Jobe, Malachi Moore, Alabama's corners, because they're not going to be playing a lot of press man coverage, in my opinion. They're not going to be right up in their faces and trying to play physical with these guys. So that will help. But still, it's the air raid. You're going to have some downfield shots, and when you have guys with that kind of height, I imagine they're going to give them plenty of chances to win downfield and win some 50-50 balls against Alabama's defensive backs. Another thing that I didn't know about the air raid until I started prepping for this game is their running backs, not only do they utilize them out of the backfield, they catch the ball just as much as they run it. If you look at their running backs' carries compared to their receptions, they're right about equal. And actually, Kylan Hill and Joquavius Marks are 2 of Mississippi State's running backs, but they are actually tied for the team lead in receptions as running backs, which is just not something that you see very often. That's just another quirk of the air raid. And Kylan Hill, actually, as talented as he is, that's a name that y'all are probably very familiar with. He has actually opted out. He missed the last game against Texas A&M, and Mike Leach confirmed Wednesday morning on the SEC coaches conference call that he has opted out and he is on to the NFL. So that's one of Mississippi State's leading receivers, talented running back, and he is no longer with the program. So Joquavius Marks, number 21, is now going to be Mississippi State's top threat at running back. Another quirk of the air raid is if you look at the offensive line, the splits between the offensive linemen are really wide. Like probably 2 or 3 times as wide as they normally would be. So what does that mean for Alabama's front 6? Well, the thinking behind that alignment in the air raid scheme is that it creates a longer route, a longer path to the quarterback for the defensive lineman, which is, of course, true. But also, I would have to think that it makes the protection more vulnerable to a stunt. Because if you have, say, an outside linebacker or a defensive end and a defensive tackle swap rushing lanes, if that gap is 2 or 3 times wider, I mean, it's self-explanatory. I don't even need to explain it. There's just a lot more space that those offensive linemen have to cover when they're trying to block these 300-pound defensive linemen who are going to try to knock their quarterback's head off. So that's something that Alabama has done, is stunt and have some movement on the defensive front. And, I mean, I'm no scheme expert, but I would certainly think when you see those big spaces between the Mississippi State offensive linemen that you would try to attack that with some movement. So that's something I would expect Alabama's defense to do and try to get some pressure on Costello or Rogers, whoever is under center, or not under center, whoever is in shotgun, to be more precise, for the Bulldogs. And I think you can also take advantage of those gaps with linebacker blitzes up the middle. If you have a speedy linebacker who can, you can give him a little head start right as the ball is snapped, it's going to be tough for a center or a guard to cover that wider gap when a linebacker already has a head of steam and is charging right at him. So especially with Christian Harris, that's something that Alabama has done with him on third down in their dime defense, or sometimes even just on a regular down. They'll bring him and try to get some pressure. So I would expect Alabama to do that as well. Christian Harris, they do it with Dylan Moses a little bit too, but especially Christian Harris because of the speed and the athleticism that he has. I think your defensive linemen who can move better laterally, I think they will probably be able to have a little bit more success against this air raid offensive line with the big gaps in between the linemen. To me, Alabama's offensive linemen that have caught my eye with their ability to move laterally are Byron Young, Fedarian Mathis, and Christian Barmore. The other guys, Justin Eboigbe and DJ Dale, maybe not as much twitch, not as much lateral agility. LeBrian Ray, by the way, is expected to miss this game. It'll be the third straight game that he's missed with that elbow injury. But Young and Mathis and Barmore, to me, are the twitchier guys who can make plays moving laterally at the line of scrimmage, shoot in the backfield, and get some tackles for loss. So those would be the guys that I might expect to be a little bit more disruptive in this Mississippi State game. So keep an eye on that. Byron Young actually got a shout out from Saban this week for his athleticism. And Fedarian Mathis and Christian Barmore have both seen their playing time increase as well. I'm already at 45 minutes. Going to try to wrap this up quickly. Talked about the linebackers, talked about the front. Let's talk about Alabama's dime defense, because they're probably going to be in their dime defense, which means 6 defensive backs a lot of the time, because Mississippi State has 4 wide receivers on the field basically all the time. So when we talk about the dime defense, 3 guys are basically locked in. They have been in those spots all season, and they ain't changing. So that's Patrick Surtain, Josh Jobe, and Malachi Moore, your 2 outside corners, and then that nickel corner, or the star position, as Saban likes to call it. They're not going anywhere. They are locked in. They're playing great, and they are locked into those spots. But there's been a lot of shakeup at the safety position, so let's run through this real quick. The defense started with Jordan Battle and Daniel Wright as their 2 safeties to begin the season, and DeMarco Helms was their 6th defensive back who came in dime. That's called the money position, that 6th defensive back. In the next 2 games, A&M and Ole Miss, there was a big play in each of those games that was at least partially attributable to a mistake by Daniel Wright, and after each of those plays, Helms, who beforehand was only coming in as that 6th defensive back in third down passing situations, he took Daniel Wright's spot. So after that big play in each of those games, the safeties were Jordan Battle and DeMarco Helms. Well, then that led to DeMarco Helms starting at safety against Georgia in Game 4. He played the full game. He played all 70 snaps. It was the first time in his career he had ever played every snap. So after that game, it looks like DeMarco Helms has just played an entire game at safety back there with Jordan Battle. So it looked like those 2 were your starting safeties, and then Daniel Wright would be the one who would be the 6th defensive back coming off the bench to play in that dime defense. But then what has really confused me about the Tennessee game is that DeMarco Helms is nowhere to be found. He played 3 snaps in the game, and they came late in the fourth quarter. So what the deal was in the Tennessee game was they had Jordan Battle and Daniel Wright back as the starting safeties, which was the case at the start of the season. And then when Alabama went into its dime defense with the 6 defensive backs, freshman Brian Branch was that guy who came in and played that money spot, not DeMarco Helms. So what was weird is Helms, in a span of a couple games, he takes over for Daniel Wright in the middle of a game twice, Then he starts a full game against Georgia, and it looks like he has that spot locked down back there next to Jordan Battle. And then against Tennessee, he's the 7th defensive back and is a backup and doesn't get to play until late in the game, the last couple minutes of the game. Well, Saban mentioned Brian Branch this week, or he was asked about him, and really what this boils down to is it sounds like the kid is just starting to come on strong, and he has won that money spot, the 6th defensive back. So Nick Saban was asked about Brian Branch and the progress that he's made, and it looks like there's going to be another true freshman in the secondary from this point forward. Malachi Moore has started at star all season, and here's what Nick Saban had to say about Brian Branch's progress.
Well, I think Brian has really made a lot of progress. You know, he played star for a long time in the beginning of the season. Malachi sort of stepped up in that role, so he was a backup, but we've tried to develop him as a safety, and he's made good progress there. Now we're playing him as a 6th defensive back, a little better cover guy for us, I think, good blitzer. So he's moved around a lot, which I hate to do with young players. I like to put them in one spot and leave them there. But he has handled it extremely well and has really made a lot of progress, and I think will be a really positive contributor for us, the rest of the season.
So Saban talking about true freshman Brian Branch back there in the secondary. When Saban talks about a defensive back's intelligence, this is a tough defense to pick up for defensive backs, especially for a young player to be able to succeed at multiple positions. That says a lot about how Saban views Brian Branch's intelligence and grasp of the playbook. So that is a very good sign for just his role on the team this year and moving forward. So Brian Branch, it looks like, is going to be that money position, the 6th defensive back in Alabama's dime defense going forward. It looks like he has won that over DeMarco Hellams. So Brian Branch has only played 15 snaps this year so far, but just because of the personnel that Mississippi State uses with their 4 receivers on the field most of the time, Alabama's going to be in dime a lot in this game, which means we're going to see Brian Branch a lot in this game. He's played 15 snaps so far. He will probably see 60 or 70 against the Bulldogs. So he's kind of bursting onto the scene here, but according to Nick Saban, it sounds like it's well worth it. He mentioned the coverage and the blitz ability of Brian Branch in that clip. I actually tweeted a video a little bit earlier about a video of every snap that Brian Branch played against Tennessee. Now, granted, it was only 6 snaps, but you can see the different ways that they like to use him. There was a play, I think it was 3rd and 8, where they had him basically lined up in a kind of linebacker position. It's the first play in the clip that I tweeted, and he kind of runs up. It's like a delayed blitz. The ball is snapped, and then he kind of sprints into the backfield, misses the tackle, but you can see that they like his explosiveness and his ability to get in the backfield in the hurry. He had another blitz later in that clip where he got in the face of Garantano and forced an incompletion, and he also almost had an interception. On 4th down, he had a pass breakup where he undercuts the route and just couldn't quite hold on. But he has shown some ability to make some plays as a blitzer and in coverage, and that obviously is going to please Nick Saban and Pete Golding. So that's all I have for the on-the-field stuff. Last thing I wanted to say, though, is just this sense that I have and this theory that I have, and I want y'all to let me know if this is really the case, but it just seems like fans are not as, what's the right word, connected or invested to this Alabama team. And I'm not saying y'all are apathetic, because I know you love your Crimson Tide. But my theory on this is you don't know the players as well. Like, you don't feel connected to the players. Like, think back to Eddie Jackson. Everybody loved Eddie Jackson. Everybody loved Reuben Foster, Jonathan Allen. These guys who, played for several years and were difference makers, and the fans got to know them and got to know their style of play and got to love watching them play. And I feel like, especially on defense, right now, I mean, the guys who are playing the most, I'm a member of the media, and I don't even know a whole lot about these guys because we don't get to talk to them. Like Justin Eboigbe is playing a ton. He's their defensive lineman who gets the most snaps. We've never gotten to talk to him. And this is not a criticism of the media relations people, so don't take it that way, please. But we haven't had the chance yet to talk to a lot of these guys. Christian Barmore, we've never had a press conference with him. Eboigbe, like I said, we've never had the chance to talk to him. Byron Young, I think, has come up once. Christian Harris has come up a couple times this year. He's good to talk to. DJ Dale has come up a couple times. Fedarian Mathis once or twice. But and then even in the secondary, Jordan Battle only a couple of times. Malachi Moore can't because he's a freshman, and Nick Saban has a rule about freshmen not speaking with media. Josh Jobe, we've never gotten to talk to. And I don't know. I mean, I really am curious how you guys feel about this. Do you feel as connected and as, obviously you don't know the players personally, but do you feel like you know these guys as well as players in years past? And if not, why do you think that is? Is it the players' personalities? Like these guys maybe aren't as boisterous and fiery as defenders in years past? I mean, Patrick Surtain, I think we would probably all agree is the defense's best player, but it's not. I don't know, and I don't want this to sound like I'm coming at any of these guys and criticizing them because I'm not. I mean, some guys are just more outspoken and boisterous, and some guys are just quiet and unassuming, and that's their game. But Surtain, I think, has been this defense's best player, and we just don't see a whole lot of like personality from him. He's a little bit quieter guy and just kind of gets the job done. And I don't know if this defense is lacking kind of that alpha dog, and that's a super cliche, and I don't really like to use it, but I don't know if this defense is lacking that, and maybe that is to blame for the defense's struggles, and maybe that's to blame for fans not being as connected or as invested in this defense. But I don't know. It just seems like in the past there have been a couple of players on defense that you could really say that you knew and that you loved. And I don't know, it just seems like that's not as much the case this year. I really am curious. I want to know what you guys think about this. So leave me a comment on Twitter or down below on YouTube, and let me know what you think about that. I really want to know. Let's get some dialogue going. How do you feel? And I don't mean like let me know about how good the players are. Like I want to know how you feel about these players. Like, do you feel the same emotions, the same passion, the same love about Alabama now as you always have, especially on defense? I feel like on offense, I feel like Jaylen Waddle is a very lovable player. Najee is a lovable player. Najee Harris, Mac Jones, I feel like is very likable. So I don't get that sense as much on offense as I do on defense. It just seems like there's not as much. Honestly, just not as much adoration and not as much love from the fans toward the players. And I'm very curious why that is, and maybe if you guys, the fans, feel that way as well. So that's going to wrap it up. I've gone a full hour. I really didn't intend to go that long, but let me know what you think about Alabama, Mississippi State, Nick Saban, Mike Leach, just about this matchup. I'm very, very interested to hear y'all's thoughts. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at the Ogletree. Make sure to keep up with my coverage on Tide109.com. And let's keep the engagement going. We love talking about Alabama football. Let's keep it going and enjoy this matchup between Nick Saban and the Pirate. Let's go out with some Pirates of the Caribbean. Enjoy the game, everyone.